Hello and welcome to the Game Day Podcast with me, Sam Matterface, talkSPORT's chief football correspondent Alex Crook, and European and international football expert Kevin Hatchard. This week on the podcast, we'll be reflecting on whether Manchester United are in for a cup treble, Mitrovic's misdemeanour, Haaland being unstoppable, Evan Ferguson about to save Brighton millions and millions of quids. The Champions League draw sets City and Chelsea on a path to meet in the semi-finals of the competition, but they've got hurdles to jump before then. And if Conte goes from Tottenham, who do you replace him with? It's all on the Game Day Podcast from talkSPORT. Hey, we're all in the same room today. What's going on?
It's exciting, isn't it?
It is very exciting. And I came dressed as Alex Crook today. I don't know if you noticed that.
Great tribute act.
I decided that, because I started wearing these roll necks many years ago. He copied him. One person told him he looked good in it, and he's been wearing the same one ever since. You might see by the number of bobbles that are on the front of that jersey.
He owns the theme, doesn't he?
He thinks he does. But now Ruben Selles is doing it. Ten Hag's doing it. They're all doing it.
Graham Potter.
We're all following your sort of lead.
It's often been said that I am a trend setter. So, I totally understand.
But usually in a negative way, to be fair.
A downward trend. How many people have called you the chef this week, by the way?
Quite a few. Yeah. Even some friends of mine in Portugal who I had no idea listened to our podcast. It's clearly gone global. Well done, chef. I got a message at the weekend.
The head chef. It's lovely to have you back with us. We're going to talk a little bit about stuff that could happen in the future rather than concentrating too much on the games that have gone this weekend. So we'll get stuck into what happened in the FA Cup quarterfinals and how they could impact the rest of the season. Let's start at Old Trafford. Well, there's so much to talk about in this game because there's a lot that will impact the rest of the season, bearing in mind that Mitrović probably isn't going to play for a lot of what Fulham have still got to do. And is their season going to tail off as a result of that, do you think?
I think there's a good chance of that. And I think it's a real shame because they played so well for so much of the game. Obviously, it was a handball, and so you can understand why the penalty was given, why the red card was shown. But if Mitrović has a flaw in his game, it's that he does lack control, and he is on the wind-up a lot of the time. And when you play on the edge like that, sometimes it's good, but a lot of the time it's not. And you cannot, in the kind of atmosphere we have in football nowadays, you can't push a referee. You can't be aggressive towards a referee in that way because what happens is it gets copied, it filters down, and I think we're at the stage. I know on a pod recently we talked about Andre Mariner and we had a bit of a joke about it, but actually we do need to protect referees to a certain extent. That doesn't mean they're free of criticism. Of course, they have to be criticised if they make mistakes, but we can criticise players because we'll never run out of players. We can criticise managers. We're never going to run out of managers. My fear is the referee pool is going to get smaller and smaller and smaller because they will just say, I don't want that abuse. And it's getting harder and harder, I think, for refs to come through. And what you will get is either not enough referees or a smaller talent pool, and so the referees you do get at the top level will not be of the quality we've had in years past.
40 seconds that changed the game, really, those three red cards, and there was 1 minute 29 seconds between the two goals where Manchester United went from 1-0 down to 2-1 up very quickly. But let's just look at what it means for Manchester United's season as well, because going forward for them, they're now going to obviously play in an FA Cup semi-final. It means their game against Chelsea moves around. They got Sevilla upcoming in the next round of the Europa League, but they looked a little bit leggy at times. And is the number of games that they've been playing this season starting to catch up with them?
I think so. I think if you look at their performances since that emotional second leg against Barcelona at Old Trafford, they haven't looked the same team. Obviously, injuries and suspension have played a part.
And he hasn't moaned much about fixture congestion, but he has moaned, Erik Ten Hag, about the fact that his players got injured by bad tackles from other players, and that's robbed him of Eriksen, it's robbed him of Garnacho, and actually Garnacho would have been pretty useful this weekend.
He would probably have started, or at the very least made a significant contribution from the bench. Hopefully Eriksen is nearing a return to fitness. Obviously Casemiro has this second suspension that's ongoing, and I think when the fringe players come in, Manchester United aren't good enough to hit the levels that Erik Ten Hag wants to. And if you look at the team at the weekend, not many of the summer signings were available. Varane wasn't there either. So you're going back to the team that underwhelmed last season. So I think this break has come at a good time. Let's try and get some of those players back and try and recharge and go again for the final run-in. But it's going to be a very congested end to the season. I expect them to beat Sevilla and progress in the Europa League. They've already got a game to rearrange in the Premier League against Brighton. That could be a big one. That probably won't happen till May now. You've mentioned already the Chelsea game will have to be reorganised as well. So it's an exciting time, but it's going to be a very congested one as well.
It's an exciting time, but it is, like you say, a very busy time for Manchester United. The Cup treble, is it on?
Listen, it's difficult to win the FA Cup. They're going to have to beat Manchester City at Wembley. I think that's pretty clear.
How do you know that?
They'll beat Sheffield United.
How do you know that?
I think we can confidently predict that. As confident as my 5-0 thrashing Brighton against Grimsby that you mocked, I'm confident that Manchester City will rack up a similar scoreline.
The head chef came in this morning and he said, what about my scoreline that I predicted at the weekend? 5-0, got it exactly right. I went, oh, they're playing Grimsby.
Yeah.
What did you expect was going to happen?
Well, we knew they'd win, but you know, Kev, from your tipping columns, it's not easy to get a correct score.
I tipped over 3.5 goals, but yes, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
Over 3.5 goals isn't 5-0. But Man City win that semi-final. I don't think it's a give me that Manchester United beat Brighton. I think Brighton are a good side. They've got a good manager. They're going to be well pumped up for this occasion. If they do, it's the All-Manchester final that probably the FA and your paymasters at ITV are hoping for.
I'm looking for a Brighton-Sheffield United final.
Of course you are.
That's what the people want.
That's what the people want, isn't it? The People's Cup.
The people will be going to the pub on Cup final day and avoiding the game if that is the case.
There's every chance of Brighton causing a problem.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, the way that they play,
United, definitely.
Yeah,
but there's no chance that Sheffield United cause a problem for Man City.
Brighton-Manchester City Cup final, if it were to be that, would be a fascinating game as well, wouldn't it?
Be tremendous because you've got two amazing coaches going head to head. Pep will be fretting about it all the way up to the final.
And he hates semi-finals.
He
gets really upset about FA Cup semi-finals. You spoke to him after the game on Saturday. One of the big things that he was going on about is we never turn up in FA Cup semi-finals for whatever reason. He said when they beat Brighton in the last FA Cup semi-final that they played against them in 2019, even when we won one, we were rubbish.
Well, he had a semi-final problem at BeIN as well. Got to the semi-finals of the Champions League, and each and every year he was there, couldn't get through it. So
it's lucky they've got a bye then, isn't it?
Well, not
They've
quite
got
a bye.
Sheffield United. It's not a bye.
It's a bye.
Okay.
I'd love it if Sheffield United beat them now, just to annoy him, not because I want Manchester City to go out before you start texting me.
I'm guessing you're not going to Sheffield anytime soon, right?
Or Norwich.
Or Leeds, or Newcastle, or anywhere north, really, basically.
Just chased out of every city in the country eventually.
Apart from Brighton.
Yes,
they're
very
loving
popular
there.
in
I want them to lose as well. Sorry, guys.
These are nice problems for Manchester United to have, though.
Yeah.
You know, this is what you want as a coach. You want these dilemmas. Obviously, you'd love a fully fit squad. But the fact that he has these selection dilemmas, he has all of these games, it shows how far they've come.
They'll beat Sevilla, though, won't they?
Yeah, they will, because this is not the Sevilla of seasons past. This is not the Sevilla that knocked them out a couple of seasons ago in the Europa League on their way to winning it.
It's not even the Sevilla of last season, is it?
No, it isn't. And they have suffered from eventually selling off the family silver time and time again. Jules Koundé went to Barcelona, has done very well before the injuries. Also, Diego Carlos went to Villa. Obviously, it's not worked out from a Villa because of injury, but that's basically their first choice centre-back pairing. They lost them. Lucas Ocampos was allowed to leave, but he's come back. As we record, there is talk of Jorge Sampaoli losing his job as the Sevilla coach, because even though they've got to this stage of the Europa League, they've had to really sneak through the last couple of rounds. They've won really well at home in the first leg against PSV and then against Fenerbahce, and then nearly blew it away from home in each of those ties, and they're still fighting relegation battle in La Liga.
Is this another case then? Because I think the first leg is at home again for United. Yes. Could it be a similar situation to Real Betis, that we get this game won with something to spare in that first leg?
That's what you'd hope. It's not easy to go there. They've been much better at home than they have away from home. They've been pretty pitiful away from home, actually. And they're not as good a team as Betis are. And United were obviously able to blow them away for stretches of that first leg.
You're still mocking my assertion that the top teams in England should never lose to a European team unless they're Real Madrid or Barcelona. You're coming round to my way of thinking now, aren't you?
Or BeIN.
No, I think this season BeIN should be beaten as well.
Maybe. We'll see, won't we?
Oh, we'll.
You'll be there?
I will. Manchester City against BeIN is the quarterfinals of the Champions League, which we hope are going to be on talkSPORT, and I'll be there for those two games. They warmed up nicely for the international break with a 6-0 thrashing of Burnley. And Erling Haaland, that donkey who does a bit of goal scoring, I think. Was that what you said the other day?
I said technically he looks like a donkey, but he comes alive and he's a freak when it comes to scoring goals. I'll stand by that.
Sorry, is this a magic donkey? What are you talking about? The best centre forward on the planet is a donkey who does a bit of goal scoring.
He's got no technique.
If he is a donkey, I hope he has a go at Cheltenham next year, because I reckon he'll romp up in the Gold Cup, the Queen Mother Champion Chase, and every other single possible hurdling race that there is available to him, because he is absolutely spectacular. He's got 42 goals. He's headed for 60 goals this season, the way things are going. He's definitely not a donkey. He's a terrific, terrific footballer.
He's utterly amazing is what he is. He's quick. He's strong. He has an amazing knack of being in the right place at the right time in the penalty area. He strikes the ball with such violence. And the most important thing, I think, actually, in amongst all those skills, is the fact that he has this burning desire to win, to improve. He's very self-critical. He goes back through footage and goes, I got 3 there, I should have got 5.
Oh, that was the great thing about his interview with CBS on Wednesday night when they beat Leipzig and he'd scored 5 goals. Immediately he was talking about, now I need to improve here, I need to be improved there. I missed 2 chances on my left foot. I've got to get better at that. I've got to be better at bringing others into play. He wants to make sure that he goes up to a next level. Do you think that's probably, out of all of the things that you've said, bold claim-wise, probably the most stupid thing you've ever said?
Again, you need to contextualise it. I said he was an absolute phenomenon when it comes to being a goal scorer.
What is he?
He is a freak.
You're getting nervous now, aren't you?
Someone
You're getting nervous
who basically
now.
has been produced almost in a laboratory. But I just said, when it comes to technique, being pleasing on the eye, he isn't that, is he?
He's pretty pleasing on the eye if you're a Manchester City fan.
Yeah, it depends what you mean. I mean, look, can his link-up
He's not the most cultured footballer that's ever played the game.
Can his link-up play improve? Yes, I think that's absolutely true. Can his play with his back-to-goal improve? Yes, and I think Guardiola will work on all of that with him.
He's got 42 goals!
Yeah, he's got 42 goals, and look at the age he is. I mean, he's got a record of either better than a goal a game or nearly a goal a game at Salzburg, at Dortmund, at City.
His
He's
Champions
doing it in
League record
different
is
countries.
unbelievable.
Yeah.
When you think about the level of that competition, it's outstanding.
He's got more goals already than Arjen Robben in the Champions League. I think more goals than Kaká. It's unbelievable, the list he's putting together, and he's just breezing past these people.
He's a good player.
Thank you. Okay.
There's only one donkey round here, let me tell you that. And it's not Erling Haaland. They've got a tough tie in the next round of the competition. We mentioned BeIN. How difficult is that going to be? BeIN haven't had the sort of season that you would expect them to have. Usually we get to April, Manchester City have won the League Cup and BeIN have won the Bundesliga already.
Yeah.
Neither of those two things are true this year.
Yeah, they have dropped off. There's no doubt about that in terms of the consistency, because the funny thing is Dortmund are ahead of them now in the title race, and they play each other in the Klassiker, which I'm lucky enough to be at actually on April the 1st. And Dortmund are more or less on track for where they were last season, but the difference is BeIN have dropped off a bit. Now, the danger with that is they have pulled out some performances, especially in the Champions League, that have been outstanding. They've won every Champions League game they've played, including home and away wins against Barcelona.
Well, that's remarkable, isn't it? Because Barcelona have gone the other way. They've been brilliant domestically and terrible in Europe, whereas BeIN haven't been as good domestically but have thrived when it comes to the Champions League.
And the way they brushed off Paris over the 2 legs, I mean, the way they went to Paris and effectively kept them at arm's length until Mbappe came on was really quite impressive. And even then I thought, well, Mbappe's going to start the second leg. This is going to be tough for them. That high defensive line, he'll get in behind, he'll cause some problems. No. They were just able to cruise through, played with great control. So I just wonder, in the end, this title race might sharpen them up because they're not used to having really competitive games
that's something that
at this stage of the season.
Level against them, isn't it? The fact that they're not tested to the end of the season. So by the time they get to the semi-finals of the Champions League and the final of the Champions League, they're not at the level that you would expect them to be.
Yeah.
So maybe not being as good will help them in a weird way.
That was the issue under Pep. Because I remember there was a season they'd won the league in March. It was the earliest anyone had ever won the Bundesliga. And the next game, I think, after they'd won it, they played Augsburg, which is a local derby that Augsburg care about a hell of a lot more than BeIN. But he played some kids we'd literally never heard of, and they lost. And that vibe was there for the rest of the season because they cruised to the Bundesliga title, and then they just couldn't raise their game for those semi-finals. So
you need someone to keep you honest. That's the problem.
Yeah.
That's why we're always on your case.
But I guess that's what Man City have got this season, in the Premier League.
Challenge, yeah.
So this should be 2 fully tuned, fully sharp teams going at it. I think City will come through, actually.
Well, Haaland's record against Bayern's excellent. If you look at when he played for Dortmund in the Klassiker, even though Bayern were winning those, he was scoring and they just couldn't deal with him.
And defensively, they've been so much better since Ruben Diaz has come back into the team. I mean, he is a terrific defender, isn't he?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no question about that. I mean, we've praised Nathan Ake on this podcast as well, but they're a better team with Diaz in it. De Bruyne, is he still a little bit underwhelming by his standards at the moment?
He played quite well
I
on
thought
Saturday
against
night.
Leipzig he was outrageously good.
Yeah, he was good in the midweek against Leipzig, yeah.
The thing I think that scared Leipzig early on was I noticed very early the quality of the set pieces. Leipzig have had a problem all season in the Bundesliga with dealing with set pieces. As soon as he was whipping those balls in, they just could not deal with them at all.
He responded to a bit of criticism that he got from Pep Guardiola, who said he needs to do the basics better. But he excels in the extraordinary, doesn't he? I mean, he came up with a couple of assists on Saturday.
It was a stunning pass at the weekend, wasn't it?
It was a brilliant pass. Unbelievable. And he set up 2 goals, I think, at the weekend. He was terrific. And he was terrific in midweek as well. I mean, you and I have been arguing about this. You said he hasn't had a great season. I think he's been absolutely sensational again. His levels are high. He's always outstandingly high. So even when he maybe isn't at his best, I mean, he's contributed 19 assists this season. It's not bad, is it?
Well, he had a bit of a dip with the World Cup where he didn't play anywhere near the standard we expect.
Yeah,
but Belgium were bad as a team. And I think...
And he told everybody that.
Yes, before the tournament. Yeah, we're not going to make it. We're rubbish. So that didn't help. And there was maybe a bit of a dip after that. But he is such an extraordinary player and he sets the standard so high. His average is better than most players' elite, to be honest.
Rico Lewis played at the weekend, played at left back, another particularly impressive player. He, I say played left back, he sort of played left back and then half the game in midfield. Pep Guardiola called him Al Philippe Lahm. That's high praise, isn't it?
Huge, yeah. Did we expect him maybe to be in the England squad? You mentioned that the under-21s have got some pretty big games coming up.
Did I expect him to be in the England squad? No, because I don't think Gareth is going to pick him just yet. Maybe by the time we get to the Euros, he might be a regular in the England team because he's playing so well for Manchester City. I think it's going to be difficult to ignore, bearing in mind that left fullbacks are certainly not in the... there's not a plentiful supply of them, and Gareth has mentioned that. The only issue I'd say about that is that he is a right footer. He's not a left footer.
But he offers that versatility as well,
He offers so much versatility. He can play midfield, he can play right back, he can play left back. He's just a terrific footballer. And Lucy Ward came out with a brilliant phrase about him, which is he's press resistant because he can deal with the ball in such tight circumstances.
Which is why Pep loves him, because he loves players who can break through that press and then you open up all of that space for the runners around him. And he used to talk about, the way he talks about him is the way that he used to talk about Kimmich a lot of the time. And there was one of those games in the Bundesliga where he looked as though he was screaming at Kimmich, but there was some tiny detail he'd noticed. But it was only because he wanted to teach him, he wanted him to improve, and he wanted him to be the player he knows he can be. And the thing I love about Rico Lewis is the joy he plays with.
Yeah.
He's like, it's almost every game's like, wow.
And he's so
I'm playing for
strong,
Manchester City.
Because you know his dad, Rick, was the British Thai boxing champion, right? So he's got that sort of physicality. We brought up in gyms, brought up around sort of sport. His sister's in the Manchester City Academy as well. So he's got the physicality to compete already at 18 years of age in men's football. And he doesn't look out of place at all.
And he's got that almost that childlike enthusiasm. They were talking to him about the possibility of playing at Wembley, and he was like, wow, I'm going to get to play at Wembley. So I think it's important not to lose that sometimes. That enthusiasm is a really nice thing to have. Football will beat it out of you eventually, but it's a really good thing for him to have. But to go with the skill set he has and the faith Guardiola has in him, he's not just a rising star, he's becoming a star now.
Talking of beating stuff out of you, Burnley beaten by 6-0. Obviously, that's not going to derail their bid to get back in the Premier League because they only need a handful of points in order to be able to do that. In fact, they probably don't need that many more because if they get 2 wins, there's likelihood someone's going to drop points at some stage. But it is sort of almost like a little bit of a warning for Burnley. This is what to expect when you get to the Premier League, a step up. You're not going to be playing Manchester City every week, but they've played Manchester City and Manchester United so far, and they've gone to try and play their football in those 2 games, and it hasn't quite worked for them.
No, it was quite brave from Vincent Kompany to do that. I think they will have to change the way they play next season. I think, again, that drubbing they took is probably a sign of the difference in quality between the Championship and the Premier League. I believe that gap is getting wider by the season. So, yeah, maybe it might set them in good stead moving forward. act as some kind of reality check. As you say, it's not going to derail their promotion push. They're pretty much up already. But I was hoping that Burnley might give Manchester City a bit more of a game. They did started well, but once the first goal went in, it was one-way traffic.
Opening exchanges, they looked okay.
Yeah, it was half an hour, wasn't it, before Haaland scored his first goal. And that was a neat little finish because he just touched it at the right moment. Peacock Farrell
got great
comes
technique,
out.
Haaland, always.
Brilliant.
for a donkey, it was a brilliant goal, I thought.
How did he get a little deft hoof on that?
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Galloped onto it, and brilliant. No, I mean, again, that just underlines. That's another thing about him. We talked about his movement, but he scores all types of goals. Tap-ins, he can smack it from 30 yards, little deft touches with the outside.
He's not just a one-trick pony.
Boom, there we go. And
he doesn't horse around, does he?
Sheffield United Blackburn was the other quarter-final. Sheffield United winning by 3-2. And I think they deserved it. They're probably the better team on the day. Brilliant cup tie, this, wasn't it?
Oh, fabulous. And obviously a lovely story in one respect with the winning goal scorer. But
not really. Both of the two Manchester City boys that are on loan at Sheffield United now can't play at Wembley.
That's what I was going to say. And I'm sure the case used to be that it was up to the discretion of the two clubs as to whether you could play or not. And I kind of feel like that should be the case in this instance because...
No way.
No, but in terms of development, they might not get another opportunity in the near future, these two lads, to play in a Wembley semi-final.
Oh, yeah, it would be great if Tommy Doyle wraps another one in from 25 yards to knock Pep Guardiola's Man City out of the cup. That will go down brilliantly. Has shades of Villamana Loire, winning 3 points for Portsmouth against Newcastle when he was on loan from them.
Well, that was when the rule was changed, wasn't it, after that game?
It's really interesting. In Germany, it's just not a thing. Like, in Germany, if you're on loan, you can play all the games. And
well, in Europe, it's not the case because João Cancelo will play against Manchester City.
And I was talking about, in commentary, actually, when Dortmund played Köln on Saturday, Marius Wolf is now part of the Dortmund team. And Köln had won at Dortmund 2 seasons earlier, and he was part of the team. And celebrated as if he was part of the Köln team and wasn't on loan from Dortmund. So on the continent, it's not as big a thing.
You said Köln, but to the rest of us who aren't native German speakers, you're talking about Cologne.
You mean Erste FC Köln? Yeah.
I'm just making sure that everybody knows what it is.
You too, honestly.
Yeah. The GOAT, how's the GOAT, by the way? The GOAT.
Hennes the Ninth is good.
Yeah. Because I went to meet him. Remember?
Ah, yes.
I went to meet Hennes. Do you remember?
I do remember that.
We did a whole journey about it. I went to Cologne to meet Hennes the GOAT.
Yeah. How was he?
Speaks about you fondly.
Does he?
All the time. Yeah.
He
He's
was
very
quite
frustrated.
gruff, I thought.
There you go. He's on fire
There's an
today,
animal theme
isn't
to
he?
this pod, isn't there?
He was very frustrated at half-time in the game against Bochum last week. He was headbutting one of the... Bochum.
We should do a pronunciation corner with Kev every single week.
He's been chased out of Norwich and all kinds of other places. You can't go to Germany now. Get all the names wrong.
Germany as well.
Yes. I can't wait to get there for Bayern Munich against Manchester City. Sheffield United 3, Blackburn 2 is what we were talking about. A couple of odd goals. The oddest of which was Max Lowe's goal, which took the biggest deflection of all time. I've got to admit, I was so pleased that he didn't celebrate it because he was almost a little bit like, come on.
It would have been embarrassing.
That would be a little bit embarrassing to get too excited about it, but I'm pleased that it's gone in.
Yeah, it looked like it was arrowing towards the corner flag, didn't it, before it deflected in? But the 2 goals to turn the game around,
fantastic.
I mean, they were unbelievable. The turn from McBurney was outrageously good.
Yeah.
And then obviously Doyle's hit is outrageous. But I actually thought in a weird way, I think McBurney's goal's better.
Are you sure they can't test Manchester City?
Yeah, well, especially as 2 of their best players can't play because they'll be cup tied. Of course they can't test Manchester City. They've done brilliantly to get this far, particularly when they're trying to balance winning promotion. And there's a lot of off-field turmoil at Sheffield United as well. There's a lot of financial problems, maybe that haven't even come to the surface as yet. The Nigerian guy who is trying to buy the football club, I would question his credibility as an owner.
Well, he's employed Deloitte to go through his accounts to prove that he is a sustainable owner.
I know there's 1 or 2 Premier League clubs that he had his eye on that maybe might counter that opinion.
Okay. Right, talking of the Premier League, shall we move on to the big action at the top of the table on Sunday when Arsenal went 8 points clear? Well, Crystal Palace are in a sticky situation. Paddy McCarthy in temporary charge. Have we got any updates on who's going to take over in either an interim or long-term basis?
Well, it looks like it's going to be either Paddy McCarthy in charge for the rest of the season or an emotional return for Roy Hodgson. Those are the 2 names that I'm hearing about. There was a brief mention of Jesse Marsh, I think because of the American connection, but I don't see that at this stage. We know they've spoken to Hodgson over the course of the weekend. He has made it clear that he would be willing to return and try and keep them up between now and the end of the season. But I understand that Steve Parish was fairly impressed with the work that Paddy McCarthy did in preparing the team for the Arsenal game.
They lost 4-1.
And the way that he set them up.
To be honest, I was quite impressed as well with some of it, because I thought they started with aggression. I thought they threatened early on. Zaha hit the post early on, and they played on the front foot. I think it's only when you compare it to what's gone before, which is a pretty dismal set of performances. And I know they've had tough fixtures, but the way they approach those games, quite drab. But the fact they played on the front foot, they were aggressive.
But in those drab fixtures, they were never beaten by 4-1. They were in every game.
They caught Arsenal on a very good day.
They drew Liverpool.
Saka was
3-1,
excellent.
yeah, he was. And at 3-1...
Lost by 1 goal against Manchester City.
But at 3-1, Zaha misses a great chance that could have made it 3-2.
But he's been missing chances all season. They have missed more chances than anybody else over the course of the season. That has been... Patrick Vieira can't make them score goals.
That's true. But I just think if you look at, in terms of intent, in terms of trying to play on the front foot, in terms of attitude, it was something that seems a little bit different.
Kev, tell me if I'm an idiot here. I don't understand why football clubs spend all this money. You look, we talk about Antonio Conte later on. They pay him £13 million a year. They're thinking of replacing him and putting Ryan Mason in charge at the end of the season. I like Ryan; he's a nice guy. Paddy, great guy. I'm sure he will be a manager for the future at some point. But are you telling me that as a football club, it is prudent to spend so much time backing a philosophy, backing a project, all of a sudden to change that and go with a guy who works in a different department, who hasn't got the qualifications, who isn't a high-profile manager, who isn't used to dealing with big egos, someone who's really not qualified for the job? Now, I know Crook has an argument on this, which is that modern managers, strong managers, don't employ strong assistants because they're always worried about taking the job. But it's just ludicrous to me that you would make a change and not have a proper manager in charge, lined up, ready to go.
So I agree with that.
Watford get a lot of stick, by the way, but as soon as they sack a manager, at least they got another one.
Yeah, I agree with that, because if you look at what happened with Leeds, that was embarrassing, because they were scouted around trying to get all and sundry. Alfred Schroeder got mentioned. Everybody went mad. They went, oh, no, we're not going to bring him in.
He was at the game, wasn't he? Ready to be appointed.
So that was highly embarrassing.
He'd just been fired by Ajax.
Yeah. Southampton, that was a joke. I mean, their whole managerial hiring this season has been crazy. But I do think on the flip side,
the case? Bearing in mind, these football clubs are £100 million businesses. They turn over £100 million every single year. How can you not invest in someone else, take a proper qualified individual being ready to take over if you are going to make the change in the biggest position in your football club?
Because
how can you not be prepared for that?
It needs a strong character in terms of the manager to accept that kind of person for the reasons that we said. Even Sir Alex Ferguson had Mike Phelan following him around for years.
But you don't
Harry Redknapp and Kevin Bond.
You don't have to have a strong assistant. You can just have the next person lined up.
Yeah, and a lot of clubs do that. Brighton did it, replacing Graham Potter with De Zerbi.
They're well run.
I think the point that Kev wants to make, and this is the point that I've made to you, I agree with you that the process has been poor, but ultimately Patrick Vieira, not to win a game this calendar year, only to win one game at Bournemouth since Bonfire Night, he had to go.
So it's about drift.
Manager survives that.
Yeah, it's about drift, right? Once you, as a club... And I'm totally on board with you about you have to have somebody lined up.
But you agree with me about Vieira?
Yeah, I do, because I think there comes a point where...
all those good players that they signed for him, fantastic.
Yeah, but we've seen this before. We saw it at Nice, and he started well, and then the message wasn't getting through anymore. He wasn't getting performances out of those players, and in the end, he had to go.
What players do you think that Crystal Palace have signed that would get into any other team in the top 15?
But, I agree with you that the squad is probably commensurate with where they are. I would completely agree with that.
Probably they're overachieving with the squad that they've got.
However, because he had shifted from that progressive style to being more negative, if you're then playing a more negative style and you're still not winning...
Yeah.
What was the key difference?
Becomes a big
What was the key difference this season from last season, do you think, in terms of why they were progressive last year and not this year?
Well, Conor Gallagher. 100%.
So if they bought Conor Gallagher, it would have been completely different, right?
Yeah, but that was never going to happen because Chelsea weren't going to sell him.
Well, they needed to buy a player that could go into that position and play that role.
Yeah,
that's the job of the sporting director.
I think the recruitment has been poor and underwhelming. Even on transfer deadline day or near to it, they were scrapping around trying to to sign players from the Championship and just not willing to come up even with £10 million. So I think there's a bigger problem here. But Kev's right. The style of play of Vieira this season was more reminiscent with what Palace had when Roy Hodgson was there first time round.
So let's bring him back.
And they wanted to come away from that. I agree. That to me doesn't make any sense either. But they're panicking here because they
are panicking.
They're getting sucked closer and closer to the bottom three. And they felt if Vieira had stayed in charge, they would have gone down. I tend to agree with them. I think now, if Roy Hodgson does come back, I think they'll win a couple of games and that'll be enough.
I think that you've still got a problem with Patrick Vieira because of his spat with Roy Keane. You do know those two are still mates now.
Not at all.
They're friends, apparently.
Not at all.
You're anti-Arsenal, anti-Patrick Vieira.
I'm certainly not anti-Vieira.
I think there's a wider point here as well about this kind of existential crisis about Palace, because what are they as a football club?
But this is the point.
They are talking
don't
about
have a club identity, and they've been trying to forge one. So why do you embark on a project in order to try and establish one? Sack a manager after 6 games when the first, when you had De Boer in charge.
Well, that was a disaster.
It was a disaster.
They realised they made a mistake.
But if you are, but then employed Roy Hodgson, so they wanted to change the style, and then thought, oh no, we can't do that. This is the issue. They haven't got a clear handle on what they want, and until they do that, and are brave enough to back themselves, they're always going to be in this situation.
Are you looking forward to working with Patrick at the Euros anyway? That'd be good.
I like Patrick. Patrick's a great guy as well. All this stuff about him being aloof is absolute nonsense, because he's nothing like that. I've been fortunate enough to work with him. He is very softly spoken, very intelligent, very strategic. Now, I think when you first meet him, you think he's going to be like a firebrand, like your Keanes, etc., etc. Nothing like that at all. Sits back, laid back, lets everybody else operate around him, and he observes what's going on. He's a brilliant reader of a situation.
It's Sam's birthday soon. There's a party. The invite list is out. Patrick Vieira, Steve Cooper, Frank Lampard will be there. Steven Gerrard's going to pop along with the shots.
But here's the issue with Vieira, right?
That's a joke he used at the weekend on a text message, by the way. It went down well there as well.
But it's not an issue about Vieira. I hear things about his conduct with players and his conduct with staff. Immaculate. That's not the problem. It's not about him as a guy. It's not about necessarily how he conducts himself.
Oh, yeah, but the briefings haven't been like that, because I've read in papers and little stories that have come out saying he's difficult to get hold of.
Well, that doesn't seem to match up with what I hear, what some of us hear about his conduct with players and staff. But I think Crookie's right. If you go that long without a win, people will look at it. And Palace are like many clubs in many leagues. If you're not good enough to be pushing like Brighton and Brentford are right now, you are on the edge of the whirlpool all the time. And as soon as you start thinking, we're going to get sucked in here, we're going to go down, you panic. Loads of clubs do that. It's so hard to move from that club that's seemingly 12th for all time and actually go to the next level. So in the end, you're right. They're going to have an identity. They're going to have to stick with the manager. But I can understand why they've pulled the trigger here.
If they do just bring Hodgson in, it's just a plaster over the wound, isn't it? Because there's no longevity there. So you'd like to think, if you're of Palace persuasion, that Steve Parish and the American owners, and I think there is a bit of a disconnect there, can come together and actually come up with a long-term plan as to how they can improve to the degree they want to.
How long did Graeme Potter go without winning a game at home when he was in charge of Brighton?
A long time.
You've obviously got the stat.
No, I haven't. I just remember it being about 5 months, wasn't it? It was a really, really long time. Sometimes you just have to give people room, don't you?
But the argument with them would be, and you're right, because they're run so well, but the synergy between all of the levels of the football club. And at that stage, there still was. So there wouldn't be as much panic. At Palace, is there a concerted voice on transfer policy? Doesn't sound like there is. So he's a victim of actually the fact that the club isn't run as well as it should be. Bearing in mind they've been in the Premier League for 10 years, that would be a worry if I was a Crystal Palace fan, that we're still in a situation where we haven't decided how we're going to organise ourselves operationally so that we can try and move the club forward.
Well, that comes back to the disconnect between Steve Parish and the American contingent. I guess we can only really judge Patrick Vieira on his next job. And you mentioned on White and Jordan on Monday that maybe Leeds were fans at one time. If it doesn't work out, have a grazia, they could revisit that. Let's see his next job, because I think he will get another crack at it based on what he did in his first year at Selhurst Park. And then maybe we'll get a better rounded picture of Patrick Vieira as a manager.
Yeah, Leeds were very keen on him, and you never know, he may ended up there. We were going to talk about Arsenal in this section because actually Crystal Palace lost to Arsenal by 4-1, although they've dominated the debate. And the Gunners' hopes of being champions for the first time since 2003-04 certainly took a turn north. 8 points now, the gap to Manchester City, albeit they have a game in hand, Manchester City over Arsenal. They've got no European commitments between now and the end of the season. Is that going to help them?
It should do. I think Mikel Arteta talked about clarity after they went out to Sporting. I thought they deserved to go out to Sporting, actually. I thought they were brilliant on the night, Sporting. And
good team, Sporting.
They are. They're a really, really good football team with an excellent coach in Ruben Amorim. And he made changes, understandably, and it wasn't quite the sparky Arsenal team that we know. The thing that really struck me about the Palace game was the sheer amount of work that Saka and Martinelli get through. They are the ultimate modern wingers, because nowadays you cannot get away with, I'll just get my goals and my assists. I don't have to worry about any of that defensive stuff. No. If you want to play for Arteta, you've got to work.
That's the Crook's way of playing football, by the way. If you ever played in a team with him, he's only interested in the glory.
That's a fitness issue, though, right?
No, it's just a selfishness, really.
At least he admits it, to be honest with you.
That's true. But yeah, they're amazing, because to go up and down in the way that they do, and like Guardiola, Arteta's very specific in what he wants from every player on the pitch, and they fulfil that in attack and defence brilliantly.
So, Crook, bearing in mind the 8-point lead, bearing in mind the fact that they've got no European football, if Arsenal were to throw it away from here, would they be labelled bottlers?
I think in some quarters. I think based on the fixture list that Martin Keown was running us through on Monday, maybe that would be a little bit harsh.
Martin Keown was particularly concerned about West Ham away.
Yeah,
big game.
That's nonsense. But they do have to go to Liverpool. And Liverpool's home form, despite the fact they've struggled at times on the road this season, has been fairly consistent. They've got to go to Newcastle. They came unstuck there, if you remember, at the end of last season when they were going for the top 4.
Yeah, they're a different team now, though, I feel.
And obviously they've still got to play Manchester City,
which is live on talkSPORT.
And we look forward to that. I think they're going to be the champions. I think they're definitely favourites. They've put themselves in the box seat. And the reason they've done that is because when they have had a bump in the road, as they did on Thursday, because let's not dress it up, people can say, it's a blessing in disguise. By the end of that game on Thursday night, all the big hitters were on the pitch. Mikel Arteta wanted to go through because not only is it 19 years since they won the Premier League, it's even longer since they won their last European trophy. So I do think that was a blow for them. But the way they recovered and the relentlessness with which they went at Palace, and they'd done it against Fulham the previous week, they had the game won with something to spare. And if they can keep on doing that, I think they've got a tremendous chance to win this Premier League. I really do.
You know they've got a good chance of winning the Premier League because Crookie's now going to all of their games.
Trying to wrap himself in that glory.
Let's take it back to the selfishness argument. But I've got to say, I know that people will think, it's because of this, that, you don't like this club or you don't like that club. It's got nothing to do with that. I want Arsenal to win the league.
Yeah.
I want a team that isn't Manchester City, that isn't Liverpool, that isn't United.
Liverpool only won
Chelsea.
it once, by the way.
But whatever, they've been up there dominating and trying to. They've won the Champions League a couple of times.
Yeah, they've won the league once in 40 years.
Okay, yeah. Well, pointing out, you can't go there either.
But in Manchester City's dominance, how many times did United win the league?
Sorry, Sam. What
But because they're someone different, because it's 20 years in the making, I think it's got a great arc to the story. And I think it makes the league more competitive, and it shows us, a bit like the Leicester triumph did, that this is a great league to be a part of.
You're comparing Arsenal to Leicester?
No, I'm not. But what I'm saying is that there's always a flavour of surprise in the Premier League, which you don't necessarily get elsewhere. That we're all talking about the Bundesliga at the moment because there's actually a title race. And that hasn't been the case for, 10 years?
Well, no, we had a few. We had one
but not
where...
really. Not really.
Many.
And it's still always Bayern
We
and
talk
Dortmund,
Bayern. We talk Bayern and Dortmund up until around about the end of March, and then it sort of dies.
There were a couple. There was one under Tuchel where it was close, and there was one under Lucien Favre where it was close. But apart from that, it's been pretty grim. I think from a neutral's perspective, if you like, I don't know why you wouldn't want Arsenal to win it. They're going to be the youngest Premier League champions, I think, younger than the Chelsea team.
Second youngest Premier League manager to win it, I think, as well.
They play incredible attacking football. They have some really likeable players. I think there's no reason why a neutral wouldn't want Arsenal to win it. And just, as you say, to have a different winner, it's not being anti-Manchester City to not want City to win it all the time. You wouldn't want any club to completely dominate. I think if you look at Serie A, it's brilliant that they're having loads of different champions now after Juventus completely dominated that league. We've had Inter, we've had Milan, and now Napoli are running away with it. And I think this season, whether it's to do with the World Cup or whether it's not, whether it's just coincidence, but you've got Arsenal in a really good position in England, and you've got Napoli absolutely tearing it up in Serie A.
Which is great, because they haven't won it since 1990.
But what Napoli have got is one outstanding centre forward. I know they're a good side, but he is very much the shining light. I think when it comes to Arsenal, you've got Martinelli now on 13 goals. I think Saka's on 11 or 12. Gabriel Jesus obviously weighed in at the start of the season. Odegaard scores goals from midfield. You've got people like Ben White performing really well as a marauding fullback. You had that centre-back pairing.
Major difference.
Yeah, you've got Zinchenko. Granit Xhaka. I mean, is there a more improved player in the country than Granit Xhaka?
Well, he's now playing further on. He's not being given those defensive duties he's not particularly good at. They're making the most of what he is good at, and he is rewarding them. He scored again at the weekend. He's
Ramsdale made a brilliant save at 0-0 to deny Zaha. He's made some big saves over the course of the season.
41 minutes before Alex turns around and says, my mate changed the whole game.
No, but what I'm saying is everybody in that Arsenal team is performing to their absolute maximum. And credit to Mikel Arteta, because he's getting a tune out of those players week in, week out. They're clearly buying into what he wants to do. The atmosphere at the stadium is probably as good as it's been since it was built.
Biggest surprise of the season so far? The knowledge that Alex Crook and Mikel Arteta are exactly the same age. Can't believe that they look so different.
No, he's a bit more of a just the men man than me, isn't he?
No, his hair is actually black. Yeah. He's like yours, though, stuck on, like literally immovable.
It's all that running around on the touchlines keeping him svelte. That's what it is. Crookie doesn't get that opportunity. That's the difference.
I run to the pub occasionally.
I think Napoli might take.
I
think Napoli fans might take issue with you on it just being about Osimhen. By the way,
there's
a Georgian winger who's pretty good that I've heard. He's all right.
He hasn't seen them. It's okay. We just glossed over that.
Yeah.
It's not Italian football is not his forte, is it?
No, but they do have a genuine superstar striker.
They do.
Yeah. The Xhaka thing, by the way, is really interesting for a Bundesliga watcher, because when he got to Arsenal and was being deployed in this more defensive role, everybody who watched him in the Bundesliga kind of scratched their heads and went, "What's he doing? He can't tackle." Like, because he used to get sent off.
And he's proved that.
He used to get sent off all the time.
Well, he got sent off here a few times as well.
But could he drive forward? Yes. Could he smash the ball in from range? Absolutely. So we were all a bit baffled when he was put in that position. Finally, he's where he should be.
Okay. Where should Antonio Conte be by the end of this week? Well, he's going to be back in Italy, but will he ever be back at Tottenham Hotspur? An embarrassing dropping of points for Tottenham Hotspur away at Southampton on Saturday. Crook, you were there. Did you see it coming?
No, not at all. In fact, at 3-1, Adrian Durham, who was alongside me, says, "What happens here?" And I said, "Well, Southampton collapsed because their players are not good enough to get back in this game." And then very quickly, it was 3-3.
Please tell me he outed you for that on air.
No, he doesn't like to do that to me. It's just you. But it was astonishing. And the game changed on a double substitution that Antonio Conte made. Pape Sarr, who comes on and gives away the penalty, whether you think that was rightly awarded or not is probably open to debate. He brings on Emerson Royale. He invited Southampton back into the game. And it was something, actually, was it Andy Jacobs was saying to us on Monday? This notion of managers just sitting back and trying to see out matches doesn't work. Didn't work for Tottenham because Southampton weren't going to get back into that game.
And a lot has been made of the rant that he had afterwards and the fact that he says, "We're not a team. I see selfish players and players that don't want to help each other, and it's the story of the club over 20 years. And obviously everyone was up in the arms, and that was sort of what everyone talked about. Maybe that was a bit of a distraction technique, because this team over the course of the season have been rubbish. They've been boring to watch. They're negative. They don't play any football in the first half. All they want to do is just make sure nothing happens in the game, and then they look to try and tire the opposition and then try and pounce. The problem comes when you concede early goals, which they have done on several occasions. His changes in big games have been poor. His decision not to play Harry Kane in the FA Cup seems even more ludicrous now when you see that Sheffield United are in the semi-finals. He has got to shoulder some of the blame. Yes, some of the things he has said about Tottenham is absolutely spot on. There is not a culture of winning in that club. But he should have done more to influence that and to change that. He has single-handedly taken them out of 2 competitions.
It's down to him to introduce that culture of winning, and he was able to do that at Inter. And Inter fans are not surprised by this, by the way. This used to happen all the time when he was at Inter.
No one's surprised by this.
This is what he does. It's all about competitive tension. So he creates tension between himself and the people above him. He creates tension between himself and the players. It has worked for him at a variety of clubs, but he's there for a good time, not a long time. And you know this when you bring him in.
I don't think he's having a good time at the moment, I've got to say.
Not at the moment, no.
Good time, not a long time.
But,
isn't that the title of Alan Brazil's book?
In theory, he's there for a good time. But I think this is damaging the brand. I do. I think...
What, the Conte brand or
yeah,
the Tottenham
completely.
brand?
The Conte brand.
Massively, but it was already damaged, wasn't it? Because we had this conversation, and Crook will now admit it. He actually said, I was wrong earlier on today. I know that is a major development in the Crook arc, but it's true. He did say,
Redemption.
I was wrong. And it was when we were arguing on this very podcast with Darren Lewis, who has texted me today, by the way, to defend Antonio Conte.
He still won't admit that he was wrong.
He won't admit that he's wrong. But I said Manchester United will not employ Antonio Conte when there was so much clamour for Manchester United to employ him because he is so combative, because he creates the competitive tension that you've mentioned, because he leaves a lingering mood around the place. And they don't want that. They've got away from that with Jose Mourinho. When they were replacing Solskjaer, they were never going to do it. And you were adamant that they should, because he was a winner and he was a driver. But now you can see why they don't do it.
I think also there was an element of fear there that he would uncover how badly parts of the club were run.
Yeah.
To be honest, I think that's part of it.
Maybe, but look how well they've done this season.
But yeah, exactly. They've
by
brought
creating a very different atmosphere.
Ten Hag's much more collegiate.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is the way we are starting to go. Because
that's what football management is nowadays.
Look at Conte, look at Mourinho. I think there's a danger of Tuchel going this way in a slightly different way. I think he's got to have a think about how he approaches things. That whole idea of the kind of tub-thumping manager who constantly berates players, who pushes them, who slags them off publicly to get a reaction out of them, I think that's really old hat now. Yeah. And I think it's fading into the background. And I think Conte's wrestling with
this. This weird trick that he thought he could pull last year against Burnley when I did the interview with him and he walked off halfway through. You know, the Antonio, as he's walking out the door, will you be in the dugout at the weekend? He'd been telling me about how bad the players were, hoping for a reaction.
Yeah.
Actually, it worked on that occasion. They ended up soaring into the top 4. But it's not going to work a second time. You can only play that card once.
No, and he's got a full-on revolt now in the Tottenham dressing room. There were a lot of unhappy players before his rant. There are even more now. And I think that makes it very difficult for him to continue. Obviously, he's had talks with the owners over the course of the weekend and say, look, I wasn't calling you out, I was calling out the players. I don't see how he walks back into that home dressing room.
How does that even make sense? Because there's not one player that's been there for 20 years.
What's Italian for gross misconduct?
Well, exactly. And that is him trying to make sure that his payoff, if they were to sack him,
desperate to get
remains
fired,
intact.
If he gets out of there, he doesn't have to go back to work and he's going to get paid up. You know, whatever happens, he is going to be paid to the end of the season because he's either going to be fired or he's going to end up being there. And then in the summer, they're going to have to change the manager. God knows who they get, but maybe they could go for Sporting's Ruben Amorim.
Maybe they could. I think somebody's going to go for him in the near future. I think he's getting to the point where he's done pretty much everything he could do at Sporting. He's won the Primera Liga for the first time in a long time. He has got them to the last 16 of the Champions League. He got them to, obviously, he's continued the run in the Europa League, and there's a good chance they'll go a bit further because I think they could upset Juventus in that quarter-final. So he's done a brilliant job, but he's always going to lose his top players, and he knows that. So there's an opportunity for him, and I think Tottenham, it would be remiss of them not to look at him. I think also they might look at Paulo Fonseca. They've looked at him before. Yeah. He's had a brilliant season with Lille, because Lille lost some key players but managed to retain guys like Jonathan David. He's got the best out of him. I think they're in the mix for Champions League potentially, so they could go back to him. It's a bit left field and I don't think it will happen, but Julian Nagelsmann's been linked with them before. Now, BeIN is still talking him up. BeIN is still being very positive about him. but we don't know what effect it has on a coach if Bayern don't win the Bundesliga. And this is the closest we've been for a while. So I think it'll depend on what happens against City. It'll depend on what happens in the Bundesliga for the rest of the season. But if he was suddenly available,
then there's a load of tailors in German Street who will be absolutely delighted about the fact that he's turning up.
Yeah, and all of the the various ski jackets, the sports jackets.
He is clobber central, that geezer, isn't it? He loves to make a statement. He is Hassan Hutel on speed. He's brilliant.
Yeah, he's about as good as it gets with the drip, I think. So
I think they liked Hasenhüttl before, actually. I mean, that ship has probably sailed as well, but he's certainly been in their sights in the past.
But why not?
And he's ready to come back in, by all accounts.
I do think he gets a bit of a bad rep, actually. Worse rep than he should. I think he did a terrific job with Southampton.
Crookie loves him.
I
Wants
think
to take him for a beer.
Yeah, we never got to have that beer. Maybe if he pitches up at Spurs or Palace, I'll
You'll
make a date.
start going there.
He sounded genuinely really sad then, didn't he? But I just one more on Conte. Spurs this season are getting all the bad stuff with Conte and none of the good stuff. I was there for that second leg against Milan. It was disgraceful.
It was dreadful.
It was so bad.
I did it for the television. It was awful. One of the worst games
it was
I've seen all
woeful.
season.
Yeah.
The selection for Sheffield United. Sorry, who do you think this football club is?
I know.
Golden
you can't
opportunity
say that.
to
You
go
can't
further.
say that. I said that on
No,
White and Jordan on Monday and got a bit of stick.
No,
Why?
You got it. You got it for saying, "Who do you think you are?" Remember, you're Tottenham, as if to say, "You're Tottenham, lads."
True.
Well,
No, but to an extent, I agree.
In terms of in terms of you don't want them to dream about winning trophies and you were talking about them thinking about expecting to be in the mix for top four and to winning titles. You were like, well, they haven't won anything yet. The fact is that they can't turn down the opportunity to play Sheffield United with anything other than the full team. They have to turn up.
And it sends such a poor message. It sends a really poor message to fans, just a poor message to the players. If anything, this doesn't really matter. We've picked a Porter, it doesn't really matter.
It's absolutely negligent to think that you can turn up against a team that are flying in the Championship and play not a scratch team, but like without your best players.
Well, that's what's impressed me about Erik ten Hag this season, and maybe now it's to United's detriment in terms of fitness levels, but he picks his best team for every game. He picked a strong team for Betis in that second leg. The game was won.
And Casemiro and Fernandes were on yellow cards, and if they'd been booked in that game, then they wouldn't have been able to play in the first leg of the quarter-final, which would have been quite concerning. But Bruno Fernandes has played more minutes than any other player in any of Europe's top 5 leagues, including goalkeepers, which is unbelievable, really. And the second highest on that list is...
Considering the flack he gets as well for some of his histrionics, I think he's had a really good season.
David De Gea, by the way. He is a bit histrionic. He is a bit sort of... dramatic, isn't he?
There's a big decision to make about him, though, going forward, De Gea, I think, because he's never going to be that goalkeeper with that distribution that ultimately Ten Hag wants. But at the moment, it's fine because he makes so many amazing saves, so many good performances.
What about the save from Mitrović, by the way? Which
outstanding.
In the whole sort of discussion about Mitrović and the issues that they've had, the idea that no one mentioned that David De Gea save where he arcs up and smashes the ball with his left hand after a pinpoint delivery from Pereira just got completely lost. Anyway, talking of getting lost, Nottingham Forest 1, Newcastle 2 got lost a little bit as well. Friday night we had a good game there. Actually, it wasn't a great game, to be honest with you. It was just a great finish.
Isak did well again, though, didn't he?
Isak was brilliant. Who saw that coming?
I nearly put him in my fantasy team this weekend. I went for Kane instead. It wasn't the most disastrous decision.
It was in mine.
But...
I'm not surprised by that. You've been on that train for a while.
I have been on that train for a while. It's because of the XG. Come on, keep an eye on it.
That first goal, how good's that? I know it's off his shin, more or less, but to actually
come on,
no, in a good way.
Yeah,
in a good way, because he's realised I'm not going to be able to get a clean strike on this. All I've got to do is try and steer it. It's not many players who can do that. That was excellent.
By the way, you know the other goal that was chalked off. I think the Premier League or the PGMOL have apologised to Newcastle for ruling that out.
Another apology. Must be Monday.
Bad for Nottingham Forest. They're heading towards the relegation zone. Let's skate over that. Chelsea 2, Everton 2. Ellis Sim's first Premier League goal earned Everton an unlikely point away at Stamford Bridge. Everton's hope for survival completely boosted by that, but Chelsea... Once again, they get themselves into a situation where they start to win games and then all of a sudden, bang.
Yeah, it was a backward step for Chelsea. Great point for Everton on the road. I saw a few, again, the celebration police out in force mocking the way that they greeted that point. But it could be a massive turning point in their season.
Absolutely huge. And it's a great story as well, bearing in mind this kid was on loan at Championship Sunderland earlier in the season.
Oh, fantastic. And actually they were trying to hawk him around in January and then realised they couldn't send him out on loan because he'd already played for 2 clubs in the same season, which probably
just love football clubs.
Probably tells you all you need to know about
That was the same thing about,
Everton.
is it David Datro Fofana who plays for Chelsea?
Oh, yeah.
I think he's played for 3 clubs.
He played for Mulder, didn't he?
And he's played for Chelsea. And then someone asked Graham Potter whether or not he could go out on loan. He said, we'll look at the options. Well, you won't.
No.
He can only go back to Mulder.
There's one option.
He's played for 2, so he's going to Mulder or he's staying here. It's one of the 2.
It does raise concerns, though, that result and the nature of the performance in the second half, just how far Chelsea have improved, and that's going to be put to the test in the Champions League against Real Madrid, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, probably not, to be honest with you, is the answer to that. They haven't improved enough to beat Real Madrid. They couldn't beat them last year. They're not going to beat them this year the way things are going. I thought when you were going to say about they've got a decision to make on him earlier, you were talking about David De Gea. I thought you were talking about Bruno Fernandes, actually.
And the captaincy.
And whether or not Manchester United are starting to move the jigsaw pieces around. There's a rumour that Mason Mount might end up going there.
Because I think he'll go to Liverpool.
Don't say that to me. I told you. You're not allowed to say that. You're not even allowed to suggest that is the case. Yeah. You'll hurt me to my core. Because ultimately, if they sell Mason Mount to Liverpool, right, but let's just lay it on the line here. The Chelsea ownership are discarding heritage with the player who has got a real good connection with the supporters and has come through the ranks, has been a massive part of every single age group, right the way through to the first team. Has been a terrific player. Twice Player of the Year for Chelsea in the last 2 years. Okay, and the greatest of seasons this season, but you're going to sell him on the basis of that. That's the first thing. So heritage is a big thing. Second thing is he's an English-based player, and that's really important because you have to have a certain number in your squad. So having a homegrown player for free is pretty, useful because you pay premiums for English players. He's a good player and an England international and a great ambassador for the football club. That's another thing. And fourthly, Liverpool.
Yeah.
Chelsea and Liverpool have got a horrible rivalry which has been borne out by too many meetings over the last 20 years, jibes on either side, and big, big moments in both those clubs' histories, right? Giving one of your own players to a rival of that magnitude is absolutely ludicrous. You are going to lose so many people by doing that. It is unthinkable that you could sanction that transfer. I'm sorry. I just think it's outrageous to even think about it.
Dry your eyes, mate.
It's a big test, I think, of how much they understand the club, actually, and whether they are just looking at analytics and are just obsessed with the next big thing and who's got the best ratings and whatever. So whether they actually understand the fabric of the football club. So I do think that's a big test. But, I mean, I cannot envisage a situation where Graham Potter, who loves technically gifted, smart players, can't really understand why he wouldn't be an important player for him going forward. But there we go.
I don't understand it either. It's absolutely ludicrous. Talking of ludicrous, Johnny's challenge.
Oof.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, there was talk they might appeal that over the course of the weekend. They've decided not to.
What? They wanted more games for him to be banned for?
I mean, it was a terrible tackle. It was a crazy game, that. Wolves scoring 2 in a game and not winning.
Well, including one of the goals of the season from Johnny.
Just to remind everybody that you said on the last
It was going to be 0-0.
It was going to be the lowest scoring game of the season.
Yeah. Absolutely. It was. It defied logic, really. Big win for Leeds away from home. Took them up to 14th in the table.
I think they're in the European place,
which is amazing. But Wolves have got this thing, haven't they? That they're fed up with receiving apologies from the PGMOL. They don't want any more apologies. They just want correct decisions.
Well, what about they just don't tackle like that?
Well, yeah, but this is also the tug on the shirt for Traore, which, listen, probably was a foul. But I don't think Traore needs to stop.
You can't just stop playing.
You can't just stop playing.
You cannot do that.
I actually think I went through it earlier on. That fourth goal. I'm not complaining too much about that. If I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, okay, all right, okay, you could have given a foul there, but it's not clear and obvious error. And actually, Traore is massive. He can definitely shrug that off if he wants to. He can deal with it. I'm not getting the ump about that.
They are appealing the Núñez red card. I think they'll probably win that appeal.
Yeah, I mean, there was a little sort of like coming together, but nothing too.
It wasn't
too
Mitrović, was it?
And then there was the other decision that they weren't happy with.
There was a penalty they thought they should have had.
They should have had a penalty. Oh yeah, the Junior Firpo one.
I'm not convinced by that.
I think that's borderline. I think he takes the ball.
It's not clear and obvious error.
He takes the ball.
And actually, the biggest error that anybody's made in the game is the fact that Craig Dawson wasn't sent off for going in on Jack Harrison, because Harrison slipped, but his foot goes right up the leg of Harrison, and you can't do that. So actually, the Wolves will be a little bit careful here of getting too into detail.
They've got this conspiracy theory where they feel that the officials are against them.
Yeah. Well,
why would they be?
Aston Villa and Brentford, Leicester and Bournemouth are all going to have a conspiracy theory thinking that we're against them as well, because we've run out of time. So we can't get into discussions on them, but they weren't very eventful. Bournemouth lost 3-0 away at Villa Park and Brentford drew 1-1.
He's doing well under Emery, isn't he, with Villa
City.
Tell you who I really like under them, just quickly.
Gotta go.
Jacob Ramsey. He's really good.
Oh, good player.
He's really good.
Quite good as well, apparently.
And he was caged by Steven Gerrard, and now he's free.
Yeah, but what about Unai Emery?
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Said he would be.
Okay. Well,
How dare you?
Well, let's see what happens in a year's time, because I'm pretty sure that this time last year they were 11th and now they're 11th. Okay, let's see what happens. We'll be back on Friday after England have played Italy live on talkSPORT on Thursday night. So join the boys and girls out in Naples for that, and we'll review all the action this weekend on the Game Day podcast from talkSPORT.